which brings us back to the prepaid meters and the whole purpose of what I want to share in this call today. So where I'm coming from in sharing this is twofold. One is definitely I want to share with you like what I've dug up and seen out of this whole process over a good part of last year, this whole year. Obviously with working with many of you, because some of the prepaid systems in Cape Town are different to other parts of the country. Eskom is different to the municipalities. Certain suburbs within a city also have different systems. And the thing that actually drives this for me is the lower rental market and their constant drive to see how they can save money. So whether that is obviously in bypassing your electrical meter, which we've discussed before, or whether they start looking at how much they're paying for electricity, and then they start comparing their neighbor, on a multi-let, for example, how much they're paying, and comparing the two. And then I've got now some tenants who are comparing with their neighbors, not just with me, with my neighbors. And my neighbors are saying, listen, Robin, your tenant is coming and asking to take a photograph of their prepaid electricity. And it's, it's like, wow. So, it's not that they're thinking that something's wrong, but they obviously are saying, listen, why are we paying so much? And of course, with Eskom again, just having increased their tariff in July, and we got to remember that a lot of the prepaid companies actually don't have relationships with the municipal providers or with Eskom, so they don't know about the tariffs. Some of these prepaid meter companies wait until a landlord comes to them, and of course, there's just so much scope and place where error can come in. And like I said, you may only find out about the issues of prepaid systems when your tenant comes to you and is really upset. And as you all know, I really want to avoid answering messages about why is this and why is that and how does this work and why am I paying so much? So I needed to really spend a lot of time getting to the bottom of it, seeing how it works, how it compares. Just like last week, I had some guy, he obviously went and he said, oh, I found out another meter. Can we put this meter in instead of the one that I've got in, right? So he wants me to change the prepaid meter box because he's been told that it's cheaper. Not that he's done his research, he's been told that it's cheaper. So that just, again, like if I'm not a landlord that's going to take his request seriously because, is it valid or not? This is, again, the whole reason we actually need to know. And then once we know, we need to be able to provide them with information so that they don't keep coming back, or more importantly, they don't think that we're trying to make money off them, which one can do in both the prepaid electricity and prepaid systems, right? So here is what some of my research is. I want to share with you how I'm still waiting for Citiq to pay me over 25 or close to 30,000 Rand. Man, what a process. And just again, highlights for me that I wish there were more people who are watching what goes on, like these consumer services that people are providing, because there's too many areas where the issues can happen where we actually just don't see what's going on. So obviously, if there's any questions, please do jump in. I'm going to share some of how I work around my systems around managing this, monitoring this, because at a fundamental level, I always say to you that, yes, you can so-called make money when you buy, especially if you're flipping, that is true. But I keep saying, well, I want to keep my money because of how I manage. And that means I want to take out as many of the agents as possible because one, they're often not competent, so I'm not going to get the service that I need, and nor my tenant's going to get the service that they need. And number two, be in control of things so that I can see where the issues are and where the incongruencies are or where the money is wasted, because I want to increase my yields. We all know that our yields are calculated by taking our rentals per month, taking away the expenses, whatever the so-called profit is, we are multiplying by 12 and dividing by the value of the property. So the way to increase that is you either got to buy lower or you got to keep more of your rent, which means decrease your expenses. And I think that's part of what we're looking at. So let's jump in. Here is a picture of that I took from the Citiq website. So like I said, I use Citiq. I don't actually know if I can really say I have a preference over one system than another at this moment. Some of them are frustrating. And the important ones for me at this stage would be that they have a web interface where I can actually go and pull my own reports, which, for example, here in Cape Town, the prepaid water system that I use with the Metro prepaid, they don't have a web interface. So I have to ask every month for them to send me the reports because they never do it. It's apparently done personally, like someone has to sit there, download them, and then email them to me. And they always leave one property out, or in this case, so I just, no matter how many times I speak to them, they still get it wrong. So I then prefer just to go online, log in, and I'll say, please, I'll pull the report myself. But again, that's time that's wasted, right? But at least those are some of the criteria that I'm looking for, but I want to share some more stuff with you. So if we take a look at this, this is really how to explain or understand the prepaid system works. And I'm going to go through this quickly because I'm very familiar with this. First and foremost, as we can see, that there is a base tariff. So the base tariff is going to be what Eskom or the municipality are providing the electricity at, right? And that is going to be dependent on, there are like crazy categories of different kinds of tariffs, whether you're a home, whether you're rural, agricultural, high usage, low usage, commercial business. Yeah, there's if you look at the documents, there's a huge range, right? So one, we need to know what ranges we are, what category, but that would be the base tariff. Coming out of that, of course, then you have, I'm going to just carry on with this here. There's what they call this building recovery, right? So not all of the prepaid companies have it, and it's by choice of the landlord. But in this case, you as the landlord can add a little bit more to recover for example, the shared spaces, where you've got outside lighting, electric fences, water, gates, and that electricity. So you can add that a little bit more. But as I said, that's to your discretion, right? It's not automatically included. Then all of your companies like Citiq, Meet to Mate, I think it's called in Gauteng, there's one of those there, or Uvend, they have their service fees, and that is for them to basically provide you with the service. And in that case, as you can see here, Citiq has an 8.45% fee on the total amount that your tenant pays. So if your tenant has bought 100 Rand, including the VAT and everything, then 8 Rand 45 of that goes to your company, right? Citiq or whoever it is you're using. Then you have what they call a channel fee, and the channel fee is where they bought the electricity. So if you go to the garage or to Pick and Pay or wherever it is, now it's that provider that they're going to enter in their token, their meter number. That's the channel they add in there. In this case, 3.45% for Citiq, and it can vary. And of course, then on top of all of that, they add the VAT. Now, the way that it's useful also knowing is that if the tenant buys the electricity direct from, in this case, Citiq, or through an online platform that is linked to Citiq directly, then those channel fees are waived because they're obviously buying direct, right? There's no Pick and Pay or no garage that is the intermediary. So that's one way in which they can save some money. It's like whatever, then 4 Rand out of 100 Rand of purchase. But as we said, it makes sense, or it makes an impact to our tenants, and they can do that. Again, depending on their range. If they don't have internet, like browser usage, well, then that's not really going to make much difference to them. But it is something that we can still share with them so we understand it. So this is how then, for example, Citiq works. Now, Uvend, for example, does it as a flat 15%. So if we take the 8.45% and the 3.45% and add that together, I think that would come to about nearly 12%. Uvend, for example, has a blanket 15%. They don't try and confuse you with channel fee and this fee, because sometimes the channel fees change, right? The garage might charge more than Pick and Pay than the other supermarket. So they just have a one blanket fee of 15%, and that actually therefore is more expensive than, for example, the Citiq in this process, right? Or this kind of scenario. So if we understand then, actually what we got to realize is prepaid meters are expensive for our tenants, because it's not only just the base tariff, but they're then paying probably 12% to 15% more than if it was just the residential home next door. So that's significant in the first place. But of course, remember, we're doing this because it provides us with the landlords as with the security that we're not going to post-pay their electricity, which means they could then just run off and leave us with this massive bill. And of course, it takes away the admin in many ways of having to get the electrical invoice from the municipality or ESCOM and then invoice our tenants for it and then follow up with them if they've paid and then obviously deal with all the squabbles. It can literally be resolved. So that's in the starting point. And the most important part of this is we can't change these top sections, right? The channel fee and your company fee, they're all going to be very similar. So that's not really where the issue lies. But first and foremost, we need to also understand how our base tariffs are I guess, calculated or found. And in this case, as I've said, from my research, I went on to, because I'm in Cape Town for this specific property, I went on to the Cape Town municipality and basically downloaded their electrical tariff document, which is a big document. So it's got probably 10 to 15 pages of all these kind of categories, as you can see here. You've got, as I say, residential, domestic, lifeline, home user. Then you've got residential scale embedded, generation 1. It just carries on, right? There are tens and tens of different kinds of categories, which all therefore have different tariff blocks, different amounts, all those different things. Now, what we're wanting to do, of course, is also understand, because as we know that we need to be able to explain and just calculate correctly, that there are often the introduction of the electricity use and then the daily capacity use as such, the right to use electricity. So if you look, for example, in this one where we've got here, it's also quite useful to see the different years. So some of the documents will show the years. But if I just take a look at this one here and we take a look at domestic energy charge, and we look at block 1, which is often Cape Town, the first 600 kilowatt hours, there's a certain price, which in this case would be R1.82 per unit. And then, of course, if someone uses more than 600, it obviously increases a fair amount, right? Now, these have all gone up now, so we need to bear that in mind, but that's how that works. But what's interesting is we've also got to take and calculate the basic. I think I'm going to have it on this next slide for you. We're also going to have, here we go, the daily rate, right? Your energy charge, yes, your service charge, what they call here, which basically is going to be, no matter how much electricity used, you're still going to pay the same amount. So there's every day they're going to charge you a certain amount. And in this case, you can see that the rand per day. So here, I'm going to share this example with you. The one that I'm talking about now is with the school property. So I've got 15 units on that. And in this case, because it was a school, the school was paying commercial rates, which was a fixed amount. So there were no block tariffs, right? It was a fixed amount. And therefore, there was this 56 Rand per day, even if no one used electricity, right? So that's crazy. That means I'm paying 1,700 Rand even if no one uses electricity. That's just the daily charge, right? And we all have that in some way to a certain amount, but this was just so expensive. But anyway, that's how we find that out, right? And how you can also find that out is, for example, here, this is this property I'm talking about, the electricity one. Here we can see in the picture, it told me that according to this property, there is this, my base tariff, which is commercial, small power use high. If I go back, you'll remember here, let me just go back here. You can see here, small power use, and I'm the small power use high consumption. And you remember that we were at R1.60 and 56 was then what I was actually paying. And you can see it actually here as well, that there's the R1.60 per kilowatt hour, and there's the 56 Rand per day, right? The service charge, regardless of how much I use. So this therefore shows how much electricity I've used for this period of time, which was obviously for this, the month of May. And Therefore, it comes down to these amounts, and you can see here as they take their reading. So in that way, I can actually get a sense of what is done. And I've seen quite a few of the different cities around South Africa have a similar kind of process. They will tell you the meter reading. They'll tell you, obviously, what your rate is or what you slot into. They'll often have, like, for example, if you are in domestic tariff block, they'll show you the first 600, how many units and what the price is. And then after that, what the price is. So they do obviously split that up to show that for you, right? So that's something to just so that you can check how that works. And that was the Cape Town, that was Eskom, right? As I said, it's all, sorry, that was Cape Town. Eskom has their own booklet, which you can download. And of course, likewise, it's a 30-something page document because they've got so many different variations of selling to authorities, non-local authorities, whatever it is. You need to just find again what yours is. And in this case, for example, here is a home power usage. I think this is mostly in the residential section, here we go, residential section, what most of them use. And this kind of, again, explains the different usages. And you can see here again, they've got a network capacity charge. That's the rand per day. But at least this is manageable, right? You know, 7 rand is probably, I think between 7 and 10 is probably what most residential houses are charged. I think mine was, because it's registered as commercial, it obviously just jacks it up at 56 rand a day. And that was last year's rates, not this year's rates. It's now, I think, 64. And that's just a lot. I mean, it just adds up significantly. Now you've got to try and explain that to tenants. They're not going to care about a 56 rand per day added on, right? So that's the other issue we have to think about in this case is their resident tenants on a commercial land, should I as a landlord be charging them that or not, right? So there's a balance here that I guess you're going to have to figure out for yourself how that works. So that just explains how we get to the base tariff. But what I get then is this, for example, is the building statement, and I've chosen for the same period of time. In theory, every month, this is what I get from the prepaid company, right? So this is what they get or what they share with me. I get sent to on properties, likewise the water as well. I'm just muting that person there. There we go. How it gives me feedback. And as you can see, it tells me how many units or how much has been bought by each unit or each tenant in those in that building. Obviously, and it tells the service fees, et cetera, but I'm interested in only 3 numbers. I'm interested in how much they've bought, but more interested in how many units that relates to, right? Because that tells me how many units they have in their meter. And the most important one is the recovery. In other words, how much the prepaid company is going to pay back to me. So in this case, the tenants bought 3,025 rands worth of units. However, they went and bought, right? So through different channels, obviously the shops, Pick and Pays or online, but I'm only going to get 2,611 back because obviously that difference is now going to be made up in the VAT, in the channel fees, in the Citiq service fees. And this is standard throughout, right? It's going to be very similar figures no matter what prepaid meter company you're using. But I want to know these because these 2 figures, my recovery and the amount used, is what I need to understand and know, because in theory, this recovery amount is or should equal what I'm paying the municipality so that it's literally in and out, right? I'm paying the municipality or Eskom for the electricity and my tenants are buying and paying me back. So ideally, we would want it that the tenants are paying probably about 15% more, because with all the fees and everything coming off, it should hopefully equal the same. And then we will be able to offset them with each other. There are a couple of fundamental errors here, though, right? Because one, the municipalities don't do it on month end and month start. So sometimes their meter readings can be in the middle of the month. So that means that we don't know, we can't pull a statement that with the dates correlating. So that's the first challenge for us, to measure the difference. The second one, of course, is that, remember, this is prepaid, which means someone can buy, let's just say I go and buy 2,000 rands worth of electricity in January, and maybe I'm so frugal, I could probably last on that for another 4 months, right? Because remember, it's prepaid. It's not what I am paying the municipality that month. It's in their system they have units. So if you're understanding that, it's like they're buying like a batch of units, but they might only use those in 3 months' time. And I'm obviously paying the municipality every month for what is being used, but they are therefore have got future liability of units, if you call it that way. So again, we can't just easily go and say what comes in, what goes out, and to square it off. We have to be way more clever than that. And of course, that's part of what I focused on and really looked at, seeing if I can make work. And I've shared with you before, many of you, that I have a spreadsheet system where I basically take the information that Citiq has, or any system, even with the water, I enter it in, it tells me all the information, and I'll just show you another example of it over here. Here is my Excel around it. As you can see, what I do is I actually link it to my municipal as well. So what I do over here, for example, is as I get my municipal readings, I have the dates. I have obviously where the start is, what the end. If you remember from our, you get obviously the start and the meter readings that they give you. And hopefully they are actuals and not estimated, because, well, you can get nailed with an estimated reading. And remember that most of these people, most of council and Eskom will take 12 months ago estimated readings. They don't take your last 3, they'll take 12 months ago. And that's because obviously if you were in December and they took an estimate reading, they wouldn't necessarily want to take your last few. They'd want to know what is the previous December's usage, because obviously during the seasons, your electricity use and water use changes. So I'd put that there. It would tell me how much is used. It tells me all those things. Obviously, it tells me how much, in this case, electricity I need to pay back to council. But then what I want to do is I want to create running totals where I can see what am I paying the electricity to council and what are my tenants paying and what is the recovery. So as you can see here, I've got all the information here for each unit, right, that I've got. And I've built the spreadsheet up to 21 units because one of my students has 21 units in one property. So I said, sure, let's just build it out to 21 for you. And so we can, you don't have to keep adding on. And it's very easy for me just to transfer that from that PDF that I shared onto here. And what it does is basically confirms that this is how much the tenants have bought in rands. This is the total number of units that they've bought. This here is the council amount of electricity that I am paying for, and basically is telling me how much am I making or losing. So here we can see the tenant recovery. So remember, this is, if we went back, if I go back here, you can see here that, for example, like the tenants bought 3,025 with the 2611 recovery. If I come back here, you can see here it was 2611 recovery, and it was that I think, yeah, there was 3,025 units. But we know, for example, if we even go back here, if I take that same period of time on this one here, remember this period of time, it cost me 4,206 because there was 1,800, which was the electricity used. And I had this rate of nearly 1,900 Rand was the service charge. So if I take a look at those and I put them in, this is where it is here, right? Here is the 4,206. You can see that I'm actually recovering what my tenants used, but I'm not recovering that daily charge because I can't reconcile myself for them paying that amount. And because the property is working well and a whole lot of stuff, I'm just like, listen, it's going to be crazy if the rate is so high. But this then also gives me a running total of how much is being used and also the difference between how much I'm paying, how many units I am buying and how many units my tenants are using. So this is where it's really important as well, right? Because if someone hijacks your system and uses a lot of electricity, it will show up here because they're not buying as much as they're using. So what's going to happen is I'm going to be paying for a lot more units to the municipality than my tenants apparently are showing. So I will see this column here, the difference between what the tenants bought and what the landlord bought would be extreme and would obviously just start really racking up a high total. In this case, I monitor this because I do have some shared spaces, all the outside lights, and there's certain things that are there which I'm paying for that electricity. So this kind of makes sense that I am contributing to the property. But if it goes extreme, then I can actually catch it and start inquiring, saying also what's going on. But what this does, though, is it also just gives me an indication of where are the issues that could be arising. And especially here as well, I can also now just see what my tenants' patterns, their behaviors, what their pattern is. Here I can see that, for example, in this admin 2, they've literally been using 200, the same amount of electricity every time. Now imagine, for example, that one of the guys who complains the most is this one here. So he's got like a 3-bedroom unit. He uses a fair amount of electricity, more than anyone else. And he's the one obviously that complains because it kicks him into a higher bracket. And if he suddenly dropped down to 300 Rand a month, then I know that there's some issue. He's probably got, shortcut that line somewhere and is bypassing electricity. So it just allows me to track this a little bit better. And like I said, I have the same spreadsheet here with the water. So there it is, same scenario, exactly the same process, just copy and pasted. Same process with the recoveries, same process with the municipal water, how much water is being used, is it not? So exactly all the same that comes into that. I have my rates, refuse. So all of that just allows me to reconcile this and bring it all together, right? So that for me is the way in which I document and this kind of stuff, because for me, what you measure, you can manage. So in other words, what you can't measure, you can't manage. If you don't know what's going on, it's going to be really difficult for you to make that happen. So if we're coming back then to now part of what we're actually wanting to chat about in this whole call is understanding where some of the issues or the glitches can happen, right? So let me actually just check. Are there any questions around how I document, capture, look at and see, just in understanding behavioral usage? But like I said, most importantly is I've got to track how much am I paying to the municipality and how much am I receiving in response, because that's our biggest concern, is that getting out of hand. And like I said, unfortunately, because it's a running total, we can't, it's not just a clean in and out. It corrects itself better and better over time as the running totals the margins become less and less. But I just want to check to see if there are any questions, anything that's come up. If there are, unmute yourself, chime in. If you have a better system, man, you've got to tell me, because this is something that I've been working with for a long time to figure out the best way to manage it. Just going to open it up for a minute or two just to see if there are any comments. So,
Robin,
yeah.
I've just got a quick question. When you looking at a new property to buy, and you factor in like your cost for electricity, how do you actually take the fact that now that service charge you can't always recover from the tenant? How do you factor that into your numbers? Do you use a specific percentage, or how do you factor that in so that your numbers can work?
Yeah, so that's look. I mean, so there are a couple of, if you just got one tenant, then it's pretty simple because they're going to be in charge of it all. And what a lot of the companies do is they say, please give us your previous municipal bill, because that will tell them the rate, and then they will just amend that rate onto the prepaid system. So in theory, that would be calculated into the tariff, right? Okay. Just with this property, what I did is I took, if you remember that table that had the commercial use and whatever that price was, I took that in and then I created a spreadsheet. Of course I do. I mean, come on, we're a mechanic. Well, I'm a mechanic here. And what I wanted to see, what am I spending on the shared spaces, like the lights and the gates and that? And then I kind of calculated what that was. And then I added that as a percentage. In this case, it was actually 12% increase on the base tariff, which therefore would be pretty similar to what Citiq had there as the landlord recovery. So how you calculate that is I then actually took, well, in a property, well, I'll probably suggest what you do is however you do it, I'll tell you how I did it now retrospectively, right? Is that I went and looked to see how much were my tenants spending, how much were they using, and if I dropped the base tariff or readjusted the base tariff, how much would that be equivalent to in recovery? Because remember, if I know how much they are using, they paid, I can actually calculate that. And then I saw what the difference was, and I realized that if I just increased the base tariff by 12%, I was still going to recoup what I felt was fair and what was important from my contribution. So in that case, I did it that way. it gets trickier in different properties depending on what you're prepaying, right? If it's just some outside lights, well, that's not a lot. If it's going to be that you're maintaining pool pumps and electric fences, they say aren't a lot, but it starts to get a little bit more tricky if you're like also maybe providing Wi-Fi and you need to have routers, or, so you will calculate that to some degree, but also how is that going to be split? There's 15 units, on this one property. So that means that I can increase those little bit amounts as opposed to a whole lot if there were just two tenants. So I hope that's the question, Dimitri, which is, I guess first and foremost is you give it a good go and you figure out how much you think or how much you are willing. In my spreadsheets, when I'm buying a property, I say, what is your electrical contribution? I usually calculate that between 200 and 400 Rand, for the gates, fences, outside lights. And that I think is fair enough, right? 200 to 400 Rand. If you're using LED lights and and you're not paying for a lot more, that's fairly reasonable for you to contribute to. And secondly, you can always come back and readjust it if it actually comes out and you realize that you're losing money. You can just come back and readjust it. You can just say to them, this is what. By law, you're not allowed to increase it so much that you're now like doing a business and making money off them. The rental housing is very clear on this. You go and abuse the system and say, hey, double it, please. Because I was thinking, wow, that'd be great if your tenants don't leave. They're not paying rent. Just go in and say, right, charge them 3 times the amount for electricity, please, and hopefully I'll recover my rent that way.
Yeah.
But nailed for that as well, right? So it's not going to happen.
Okay, so basically what you're saying is on the residential side, you can kind of like recover that daily service charge in a way because it's a small amount. But when it comes to commercial, it's a bit more challenging because that amount is huge. But if you can increase it by some amount, at least you can recover some if you can. But it mustn't make it so expensive that people get pissed off.
So there's another way that you can do it. Just add it into your rent and explain to them, listen, guys, currently electrical base charge is the same as your water, actually. It just so happens that water, if you actually look at your water bill, it will say the same. I think in Gauteng, it's probably, actually, it might be higher. Cape Town, I think it's 104 Rand now, 107 Rand is your monthly basic service charge for water. So you could just say, according to this, it's like in this case, right? It's 100 Rand is your electrical service charge, and we're adding it onto your rent, and therefore we're only going to charge you the electricity amount that you use. That would be way cleaner and very easy to explain.
Yes, you're right. Actually, that's a good point. Thanks, Robert.
There's no ways I'm going to do it in my places. That's not going to make sense. I can't add it onto each one because, like I said, it actually adds up. $50 per day.
Yeah.
These guys, some of them don't even use 50 Rand of electricity. They will have gas. They will use candles, even though there is lighting. There's no geysers. So now to go and say, listen, whether you use it or not, you still have to pay 7 Rand a day, or 5 Rand a day for 10. That's like,
I think you got to also be creative because, especially in today's tough market, when you tell people extra this, extra that, they'll go somewhere else where it is included. So I think you can do it, but you just got to be very creative. You can't do it like you used to before. So cool.
And also then you got to consider how much time it takes for you to invoice them. And like nowadays, I just include the refuse in all of my rentals. To invoice someone 167 Rand for refuse, and then I've got to reconcile that follow-up if they haven't paid it. Then they ask for a statement. I'm like, prepaid, you sort yourself out. Rent is rent, and I don't hear from you until there's an issue.
I also found out, Robin, when you talk about including the refuse in it, a lot of tenants now, they actually prefer it because they don't want 5 or 10 different invoices. They rather prefer one invoice with all that, and it makes it easy for them. So,
Yep.
Cool.
Thanks. Great. Miguel.
How's it, Robin? Thanks for this. This is such a key point when it comes to letting out, because tenants for them, this is a variable that kind of throws them out and that they try to have as much control over. And you're talking electricity, but this also applies to water, right?
Yep.
The question, so here in Joburg, I use a place called Meterman, very similar to Citiq, I think, and the way it works. Have you done any investigation into finding your own or setting up your own system as opposed to having to use the likes of Citiq?
Yeah. So okay. So let's chat about it because you can become a vendor. So you can still use Citiq or these ones, but then the tenants buy the electricity from you, which means you're buying it and then you obviously get the money for that. So that's one way. The other way, of course, is do it via counters, but we want to take the admin out. But yes, it can be. I haven't done it because I just don't want to do that. But I'm going to come now to this page you see here, which is the client issue. And this is where the whole thing started crashing for me. And that's what we'll get into. But I'm assuming that's what you're talking about, which is, so for example, in big buildings, right? So one of my contacts, they buy bulk, like at crazy rates, and then they manage the sale of that to their tenants. And they become the vendor, and that's how they actually make their money. They say rentals and sale of the actual rental, they don't make money out of the rental of the places. They make money off the difference between what they're buying, the water and electricity, and the selling of it to their tenants. That's where they're, as the property investors, are making money, not in the rental per se. So that was interesting, right?
Yeah. I'm just thinking, in this era, smart water meters were smart, 4 or 5 years ago. Surely with the phones the way they are and metering systems and just management systems on the back end, this doesn't, we don't need to use the likes of Citiq and prepaid, Meterman and all these other guys. Surely it's got a much simpler way that takes the middleman out, able to, just as a thought. So,
I mean, I'd hope so. But, then what people are going to ask is, well, if you take that person out, then there has to be another person in there. That's what's going to continuously happen. I mean, whatever your system, there's always going to be someone else who's going to have to be the interface between the municipality and then you.
Yeah.
Or in the self.
And I fully subscribe to the fact that you want to take admin away and happy to pay for the admin to be taken away. But at some point, I think Meterman charges 17%.
Yep.
On top of it. I mean, that's quite heavy. And when you're looking at a portfolio of tenants, that's a couple $1,000 a month actually.
Yeah.
So there's motivation to start looking at some other sort of rudimentary app or something that actually just somehow does a calculation for you. Anyway, just thought I'd throw it past you.
As I said, there is that, and it is possible. I know the direction to go in. I just haven't gone that way because it still didn't make sense to me from what I'd done from the surface wise. But I agree, it'll move that way more and more as people start.
Cool.
What are they? What value is Citiq or any of these, like Meterman as well, actually giving us? Except just to apparently create an interface where you pay money and you get a token. That's it. It's like, and like I said, the crazy thing is a lot of this is done manually still. They go through, they do it, email it. It's not, anyway, I don't want to get to that at this moment. It's absolutely. Let's move on, and I want to share with you where part of the issues came up for me, and it starts relating to part of what Miguel is sharing. So in many of these companies as such, you can also do self-issue, which is the landlord. I can, like, for example, you see here, I can go online, find the building or the meter that I'm wanting to self-issue for. I can type in here the amount, for example, in this electricity, and for electricity, I can go and say, I want to generate a token for 600 Rand. And I can then, obviously, it would then, as soon as I click self-issue, it then obviously issues the token for me and I send that. So I use this in the student housing because I'm prepaying their electricity and water, right? So that's part of their rent. So that means that I don't want to go online, buy the electricity and then send them the token. I'm going to now go straight onto the website of the company. I'm going to self-issue a token to a certain value and obviously then send them the token because it's immediate then. Take note though that Citiq will, or any company will still charge you their service fees of 8.45%, even though I've obviously done this myself. They're going to say, well, it was their interface, therefore that I generated it through. But at least then I'm not paying someone 600 Rand and then they're having to recover that back. Now, the issue here with Citiq is at first, they said they couldn't reconcile both of these, that in my case, with the student housing, it's I'm paying a certain amount, and if that electricity runs out, the tenants must top it up themselves. So there's two separate systems. There's what they call the self-vend, which the landlord sells, in theory, the electricity. So using this client issue, the self-vend, I could actually, let's say a tenant says, Robin, I'm wanting, X amount of kilowatts. I can come buy it here and I can sell it to him, sell a token to him for slightly more and make money, right, as a self-vendor. But the challenge with that is that they couldn't reconcile the two, which is have me buying it through this way and then them still being able to go to a shop and do it. Well, that's what they said they couldn't. And then after about a month, they said they could. But it seems like that's where the issue that I came into really started playing up a bit. So that's what I've been doing on the student housing, is obviously then pre-entering it in here and then sending the units across. And the challenge, I guess, came as well. If I go back to the spreadsheet that I use, right, this spreadsheet here, what I would do is Citiq, for example, would send me those. Remember, they would be sending me this, and I would look and see, okay, 2611.02 is my recovery. I'd go back to my spreadsheet. I would enter in the 2611 or whatever it is, and I'd say, fantastic, that's what my recovery is. And then I started to realize that, hey, actually, something wasn't right. Because what I wasn't reconciling to was my bank statement. I wasn't checking if that actual 2,600 of recovery was actually being paid. They sent me the report saying it was paid, but I never went into the bank account and checked and validated it, right? Because I've obviously got a whole lot of different, on the 2nd of July or whatever the date is, I get Metro and Citiq all paying their amounts in. So there's all these different ones in the bank statement. And of course, I've set a rule in my online accounting, which says, if you see something labeled as this, then just immediately journal it into prepaid water tokens recovery. And I'm like, click, 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 sure, it's sorted, And that was the one mistake, is I wasn't actually verifying that they were paying me what the report said they were paying me. I didn't cross-check that until I decided to check it the one day. And this here is what we're seeing is here, for example, is a billing statement for one property. And then here is another billing statement for another one. But on these two dates, on the 3rd of May, these actually were the amounts that were paid into the account. So it should have been 1,985, but it was only 863. And it should have been 2,600, but it was only 1,000. So when I saw this issue, I then phoned Citiq, their help center, and I said, listen, guys, please confirm with me, how much money did you actually pay for this month of April, right? Because remember, this was paid on the 3rd of May. So the 3rd of May, this amount was paid. The guy in the call center pulls up the report and he says, no, Mr. Booth, you were paid the 1,985 Rand. And I'm like, I get you're just looking at the report. Please look at your bank statements and tell me and confirm to me that you paid it. Again, he tells me, yes, I can confirm with you that you were paid the 1,985 Rand. And after 15 minutes of trying to explain to him that I get that that's what the report says, I'm not looking for what the report says. I want to have confirmation of the actual amount. Like, show me your deposit slip. Because believe it or not, all of this is done manually. Right? It's still done manually. It's not automated. They have to sit there and punch in all these figures and numbers in and send them to people's bank accounts. So at some point, I just realized this guy's not going to help me. As I said, I want to speak to your manager. The manager came on. At least now it didn't take me 25 minutes to explain to him. He followed the similar route of his call center guy. And then he actually said, okay, no, I can see that there seems to be a problem here. And at least we got to step one now as such. He said he was going to take this up with the rest of his development team. He would look at where the issue was and they would get back to me. Nothing actually happened. And then like 2 weeks went by, I phoned again and said, listen, you need to sort this out. Tell me what's going on. And then finally their tech guy came and said, oh, listen, we actually don't know where the glitch is. We don't know why this is happening. And I'm like, what do you mean you're telling me where you just don't know? And they said, okay, they're going to have a look and actually, then see if they can sort it out. So he then came back and said, the issue seems to have been when we did this adjusting of trying to make me able to issue tokens, as well as my tenants able to buy tokens. I mean, that's obvious. Why can't that happen? I had a situation with the water where there was a leak, and the tenants ended up paying for like 8,000 rands worth of water in 2 months, and I wanted to refund them that. So I just prepaid, like I just client issued, I think it was like 30,000 liters in like saying, sorry guys, our fault for the leak, and here are the next 30,000 liters on us, right? So there are times when surely we're going to want that ability to do that. And of course, in student housing, definitely we want both of those options. But anyway, so this is what he thought the issue was. But then it got me thinking, it's like, well, if this was the issue, then maybe it's actually even worse. So maybe this is not just on this meter and on this building, maybe there's something else. So I started going back and I realized that they hadn't actually paid me anything on all of my properties for over 4 months. And that just got me like so pissed off. So now I again tried to get on the phone with these guys. And he first off starts by saying, oh, Robin, we've paid the amount of your meter and everything is sorted. And I said, yeah, I've actually just gone back and I've checked everything. And do you know what I found? And then he admits, he says, oh, yes, we see that actually nothing was paid. And I'm like, exactly right. So I'm still backing. I still don't have my money in my account back then. They've agreed that this is where the issue lies. He agrees that something has to be done about it. But it seems to be an absolute fight for me to actually get this from them. And, and now they're saying the challenge has to be with certain bank accounts. I'm like, you guys paid into these accounts every month. So what's the problem here? You've admitted it, you can see it. Like, no, we'll pay it for the next few months or next few weeks. And that was a month ago and it still hasn't come through. So I'm not sure if they've actually sorted the issue out. But again, it just reminded me I need to be on top of this, because if we're not on top of it, we lose it. And on top of it may mean different things for each of you, right? Might be something different. So here are my tips, right, on really what I think that you should be doing about your prepaid, even if it is a single tenant or multi-tenant or whatever it is. I still think that the same principles apply. And I see that Shida has asked who are the reputable water prepaid providers. I don't know. They are touted, Citiq, as to be one of the better ones, right? So again, I don't think they are so-called, I think you got to see all of them as there could be something that's not right. Because in theory, a lot of the mistakes could come because you've got the wrong categories or you're the wrong tariffs or you didn't update them. Or what I've got with Eskom at the moment, coming back to the Elsie's River scenario, and this is also a challenge, is that, remember, I took transfer in February. And when you transfer, they have an outgoing inspection or move out inspection and then a move in inspection. That's what they call it. And the move out obviously is just cancelling off the previous seller's account. And it's not done with Eskom. It's not done as part of the rates transfer, right? It's not done as part of the transfer of the property. The seller and the buyer have to do this outside of the transfer, which is crazy. But that's with the Eskom here. So now trying to get hold of Eskom to do the ingoing actually still hasn't happened. And we're now in August. And the challenge is that in the situation where the new account has not been created, the prepaid meter companies default to a limbo tariff. So I've got my tenant saying, Robin, this seems really high. And I'm like, I'm trying to get Eskom to confirm and clarify what our base tariff is. And we don't know at the moment. And that's just crazy. We're in August, transfer happened in February. You can't get hold of Eskom on their customer service line, can't get hold of them, they prepaid anything, or their SMSs or their emails. And here we are sitting with this. So again, this is the challenges of that. But this is what we want to know, is understanding how it works. So number one, make sure you know your basic tariffs. And of course, if you're wanting to, as Dimitri has said, add in different sections or add in a recovery or not, or add in a little bit more, however that looks, you need to really work that out and resolve that. How you do that? You go to municipality tariff books, take a look at it, or the Eskom book, depending who's your provider. and figure that out so that you can get on top of that, right? And then know your numbers. So that's the first thing. Next, I've always suggested what you can't measure, you can't manage. So you want to also know why there is a difference between how much you're paying the municipality and how much your tenants are paying back. In other words, in my case, for example, my caretaker on the school property, I pay for his electricity. I'm very happy to, you know, he actually doesn't pay rent, I pay his electricity. And therefore I know that there's a certain amount, if you look at my spreadsheet, you'll see that there's a loss in the landlord column, not the one we saw, because that was for the other property at the bottom, but for the other multi-let where he is part of, there's 6 units there. His doesn't have a prepaid meter. So actually, I think I'm out by about 300 to 400 Rand every month on that. If I actually go back here, I just want to see if I go back to the top house electricity, and we take a look, I think somewhere here you can see the difference between what the landlord bought and what the tenant bought is about 300 Rand. And that's what he uses, right? So I'm happy with that for him because I'm contributing that. So, but I understand that, so I know that, right? And what's actually interesting in this one again, and this might be useful for some of you, is this building has a council prepaid meter. So I've got a council prepaid meter, and then I've got sub meters. So I am prepaying electricity for the council meter, which I have to be on the board about, right? So I've figured out that, as you can see here, I'm putting in probably about 2 to 2.5 grand a month. So I have to be on the ball about that, because if that runs out, the whole building just shuts into darkness. So you've got to be careful about that. And I'm then looking to see, well, how much am I prepaying as to how much are my tenants? And as you said, I'm losing probably around 300 Rand a month, but that's going to the outside lights and to my caretaker's electrical use. So that's where I understand it. I understand what I'm seeing there, and therefore I'm not freaking out about it. So that would be the next thing, of course, is you're going to get tenants asking you, how do you come to this amount? Why am I paying so much electricity? So I've prepaid a screen recording explaining how the base tariff works, explaining how the fees are, explaining how they can save on the fees, so that therefore, if anyone asks me, I just send them that, and it just alleviates all of this issue of me trying to explain this, especially for those of you who have the block tariffs, because what's going to happen is someone buys at the first of the month, where let's say they're buying 200 units, and therefore they're buying in the block 1 tariff, and then the next door neighbor buys on the last day of the month, and he's already over his 200 or 400, 500, 600 block, and he's paying double, and then they compare, and then they come and ask you. So you need to have an explanation of how that works, right? And remember that in the block tariffs, I've mentioned this every time, with the multi-lets, if the municipality is providing you with the first 600 units at, let's say, 2 Rand, and after that, after those 600, they're providing it to you at 4 Rand, if you have 5 meters on the property, that 600, that first block is divided by 5, right? Which means actually your tenants now can only buy, 120 units at the lower price. And then the thing after that, they're paying a higher price. So again, if those of you who have block tariffs in multi-lets, your tenants are getting nailed, because very quickly they're out of the lower block and they're right in the higher block. Whereas if it was just them on the property, they would have the first 600 all to themselves, and only after that would they increase. But now those blocks are divided by the number of units on your property. And of course, your prepaid company calculates that for you. They put that in automatically. That's not up to you. They do that when you tell them, or when they see how many meters are on their system, right? Understand the daily rate, as we've discussed. That's the daily service charge. And that's there for water as well, water and electricity. And I've seen in the Gauteng municipalities and the Rustenburg municipalities, that's still the same, it's all there. So again, just understand how that works. We spoke about the block tariffs on the multi-let, so that's going to be very important. And, you know, Miguel was talking about meter man or meter mate. I don't know if those are different, but here's a really important piece of information. You need to also find out that sometimes, right, there is that vacant, that kind of like daily service charge that is sometimes calculated. So if your unit is vacant for 3 months, that meter accumulates that daily charge as such, and then your tenant moves in, let's say after 4 months of vacancy, buys electricity, and literally let's say they've paid 200 Rand and they're going to get like 2 units because all of that 200 Rand has gone to the previous month's vacancy because no one bought electricity, and therefore that charge was not deducted from the vacancy process. So I mean, I couldn't believe it when we had to, obviously when I inquired about this with actual companies, but that is there. So again, you need to understand how you set up the system or how your company set up the system, because those tenants freak out when they just move in and suddenly they buy 300 Rand and they only get like 10 units. And that was because the unit had been vacant for 4 months, and that meter as such had accumulated all of those service charges, those monthly service charges. In this case, what I suggested to my student, who this was one of her properties, she actually just built that daily rate thing into her rent, and therefore said to the meter company, just take that functionality out, please. And people must only pay for what they buy, not for the daily rate process, and do not accumulate during vacancy. Because that would mean, I also said to the company, I said, so that would mean that my client, my student, would have to phone every time that a tenant left to stop that service process, and then phone again when a new one came in. Now, we're talking like there was, I think, 85 leases with this company under my client, my students' different properties. Like, really, is that admin that you want in your head? So I just said, listen, build it into the rent and let's just make it work so that it takes out that administration. So that's exactly what happened. So there we go. Those are my tips about the prepaid scenario. It's really going to come down to my mistake was, I mean, like, I consider myself fairly jacked on this, right? I kind of think I understand this, and I made the one mistake, which is I didn't check their reports to the deposits being paid in my bank statement. Because like I said, it's all automated with the rules that reallocate into the journals, because that's just another whole layer of admin that I have to now sort out. And actually go check, did they pay it in? Yes, and in each one, which is just cumbersome, right? But that has cost me, as I said, it's between 20 and 30,000 Rand, which now, I mean, I've been fighting for it. And as we know, with all of these service providers, the amount of time that I've spent on the phone with them, my time, let alone cell phone costs, is huge, right? So those are the things that are really important. Any questions around what I've shared, any insights, any other tips that you can see, anything else that you want to explain here or add?
Did you check any other properties?
Just say it again. Did
you check that this didn't happen on your other properties as well? Because they're saying that the problem is...
they did it. No, it was all system-wide, all of them, all of the properties.
So then it's not the fact that, you have students and they're buying and it's another issue.
It might be. I don't know if it was, because so the way that I've got it is it's all the properties are registered under one account name.
So you have the same functionality for all the properties.
Yeah. So what you go on to Citiq, and then you can choose your buildings or your properties, and each obviously building has its own meters and that. And obviously, when they did it, the system must have glitched on all of them. It impacted them all. So there I was with my spreadsheet, feeling so happy that I'm managing this because I'm punching the recovery rates from the reports that they're giving me, but I didn't check if they paid that into my bank account. And that's when it came up, and that's what now I'm fighting for. And actually, you know what? It would never have shown up, because they will keep sending me those reports, and I'll never have figured this out until I decided just to check it. So again, what we can't measure, we can't manage.
And they don't care that you have properties and so many people that have properties with them. Surely that makes a difference.
Well, I hope so. It didn't. I said to them, listen, guys, this is not great. We're a group of property investors. I have no qualms, because I don't want to go around blaming a company if there's a valid reason. But with how they've handled this, this is something, you know, as a service provider, you guys need to look. There's two things out of this. One, I'm talking about Citiq because they have not handled this well. And if you are with Citiq, you need to double check that things are legit. Secondly, everything I've said here actually applies to no matter what company you're at. And this is the same with water, electricity, anything. We need to be able to track and measure. Otherwise, we're not going to understand what's going on. And that same student I was referring to, that you know, she used the spreadsheet that I gave her on that one, and she's now saving between 8,000 and 10,000 rand a month just because she's now able to track. Whereas before, like her electricity bills were between 80 and 100,000 rand, and they had prepaid meters in place, and that was their loss. But that was a different matter. That's because also they had like geysers that were shared between two different units, and the geysers weren't on the electrical prepaid line. So it was on their line, but they didn't understand how the electricity was set up. I mean, imagine losing 100,000 rand a month and you don't know why. Losing. This isn't the cost to the municipality, it was losing. Any other questions? Okay, great. Well, the next story I'm going to tell when we're finished and come into our next call is what these little nuggets are, these little balls. As you can see on the left, I'm chopping this out of this rock on the left here. If I can get my cursor there. You can see I've got it on the right. That's what these little things are. They're called, or they can sometimes be called thunder eggs. And this was also on that trip. So I'll share a bit more of that on our next call. But otherwise, then that's probably more or less bringing us to the end. Any other questions about this or anything else that is coming up before we shut off and say good night?
Just, have you thought of a potential solution?
For what we've been like everything tonight. I haven't, no, not really. Miguel has asked an interesting question about, you know, how do we do it? How do we cut out the middle person? How does that work? You know, I think the biggest risk area is, like I mentioned, even if their systems work 100%, the system that doesn't is understanding your base tariff and making sure your calculations are correct. In other words, how much do you want as recovery? As you can see, like you only get paid back, you get paid back short 15 to 18% of what the tenants have bought. So you've got to make sure that tenants are buying more than what you're paying for the municipality. So that's for me, where the real issue will come into. If that's done correctly, you understand it and can do it quick and sort it out, then it's just a matter of ensuring that it comes up, you know, at the end of the day. I had thought that if I have in my journal and my accounting software that the amount that I'm paying to the municipality and the recovery from the prepaid company into one account, so they'll be in and out, I would always be able to see how much am I losing or making by the running total at the bottom. That was the easiest way for me to do it. But like I said, there's still some risk in that it's still retrospective, and people, if they buy in bulk, it's actually a future liability, not actually what they've used. It's they're buying pre-using, which means it's out of sync. So I don't have another solution out of that at this moment. I do welcome the smart meters more and more as they come in, but I still think a smart meter is still going to have a middle person in there. And you know, some of the risks of the smart meters is, like someone was telling me, when the battery dies after 3 years, you have to go and replace the old meter because they don't have replaceable batteries. You know, crazy, some of the stuff out there. The tariff block scenario. So like I said, the way that they set it up, so that let's say you got your 5 meters, 5 tenants, 5 units, and there's the 600 block. Each of those have 150 or whatever it is. That first amount, that 600 divided by the 5, is for free. So even if one tenant goes and spends like hundreds of units, and I only buy for the first time in the end of the month, I'm still going to get it within the block 1 because mine is like fenced off. So it's not like the first tenant, if they buy all the 600, then no one else can get their block 1 tariff. So it's
that's quite cool. Yeah, I had it with one person used the whole thing on the first
no,
day.
no. It just is that they just get now only their 600 divided by the number of meters. Yeah.